Hi everyone, I'm Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today I'm catching up with Masha's video challenge for the top tarot trumps, and today's installment is the moon. Now I think the moon is probably a favorite card for everybody. A lot of people really like the moon. When the moon pops up, almost universally, depending on the card, but almost universally, people will go, "Ooh, the moon." So it's a fun card to read. But through the years, and I'm sure Masha pointed this out. I didn't watch her video, but I haven't watched it yet. But because I prefer to do my own thing and then go and watch hers later. But through the centuries, the moon has had different incarnations, right? It's looked differently. It was a certain way in the early Italian decks, and the French came along and seemed to have invented their style for the moon. And then the Swiss did a variation, and now in modern times, it's whatever people want to make of it. So I'm just picking 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just picking 5 decks. That's it. I try to keep it short and sweet for these videos. Now, for the earliest incarnation, one of the earliest incarnations, I'm using the Personal Modrone by Benedetti. This is one of the, one of the Visconti decks. So it's early-ish, certainly probably before the 1500s. And here we see a representation of the goddess Diana with her with her dog, and the moon. And the concept is the moon, right? We had the star, the moon, and the sun. Some people might consider the tower one of the first celestial cards, but certainly the representation of a celestial a celestial image is in the star, the moon, and the sun, which are prominently pictured in the early Italian decks, and whatever references they want to put in to enhance the image of the moon or to give meaning to the moon. Maybe they wanted to recall the goddess Diana and her hounds. Maybe there was a particular story regarding her that came to mind when people saw this card. I don't know. But remember, it was just a card game, and they pretty much decorated it the way they saw fit. I am convinced, and I've maintained this since the beginning of my tarot days, that just because it was a card game doesn't mean that people weren't applying divinatory meanings to the cards. And I wish I could remember the source. It's in my book somewhere, but I'd have to really dig deep, and I can't. But I can't bring myself to spend all the time to do it. But I remember in my learning of tarot and that one of the historians indicated that one of the things that was done after a game was played was that the players, and perhaps it was just the losers, I'm not sure if it was all the players or just the losers, would have to come up with a story that represented what was left on the table, like their discarded cards. So I think there's like a card game called Mansion, right? Isn't there something called Mansion in modern days, whereby whatever cards are left on the table, that's how you foretell your future? Well, I think that kind of thing happened back in the day, So it's possible that if the moon card was on the table and there was a specific drawing or that reminded people of a particular story or moral or something like that, it may have been incorporated into the poem they might have written about their friend who lost the card game, right? And then from that, it's only a stone's throw from divination, isn't it? But at any rate, this is one of the earlier Italian moon cards. Now, jumping to the French, and this is not the first French deck, Tarot of Marseille. This is the Dodal, which came out a little bit later. I think it came out in like 1710. I should have checked before I think the Dodal came out in 1710. Let me pause. I couldn't find the Dodal dating on the Tarot Sheet Revival packaging. So what I did was grabbed from my trusty artisan deck, because one thing I really love about them, besides the cards, is that they always have an insert that tells you at least the date of the deck. And not all creators do that. But at any rate, I figured since I depended on their deck for an accurate date, I might as well show their card as well. This is the Artisan Dodal, and then this is the Sullivan Hissman's Dodal. But at some point, the French came up with this motif, which has become a very iconic motif, right? We have two dogs howling at the moon. We have towers, and we have some kind of crustacean in the water. Is that either on the bank of a river or on a bridge? It's not clear what that is. Let me pull the Noble. Let me pull the Noble to see if it's characterized as a bridge or a bank. Because you know how the time, even though this is 1701 and the Noble was around 1650, that's still 51 years, for bastardization of imagery to appear. Even if it's subtle, it's enough to change things a little bit. I don't have any TDMs that were created before the Noble. I'm not sure if they're available to the public or not. I know that there exists at least one TDM that is prior to the Noble, but I don't have a copy of it. But anyway, let me pull the Noble because that's my earliest copy. Well, here is one of Marco's publications, which is of the TDM, the Noble, and it's vague, right? We really can't tell if that's a bridge or the bank. So it's hard to say. This one, the Dodal, looks like there's some structure here. You notice the JP here for Jean Payen, perhaps. But anyway, you see that looks like a little bit of structure. So it's ambiguous, isn't it? But anyway, the reason I'm obsessing over whether it's ambiguous or not is because, of course, in trying to, in my own learning, I, like with the star that I discussed, the star, the rabbit hole I went down for the star and trying to understand why that particular iconography for the star. I did the same thing here for the moon. And I didn't know where to start, so I started with the habits of crayfish. I thought, let me check out the habits of crayfish because they figure prominently in this image. And when I studied the crayfish, I learned that they come out through the sand at night. And that's when they feed. So I thought, isn't that interesting? Because these two hounds are clearly going to thwart this crayfish in coming up to feed, because he's quickly going to become their prey, or they're at least going to harass him, right? So then I thought, wow. So the moon already has so many connotations. It can mean lunacy. It can mean, depression. You couple it with the Fool card. If you see the Fool card and the Moon card, and maybe one or two other cards, you can think, well, there's some instability of the emotions there, right? Especially if maybe you see a lot of cup cards, and maybe even if we see the female Pope, right? So the moon lends itself to lunacy for sure, right? But the aspect of two dogs waiting for their prey gave it a different connotation. It's almost like trying to thwart somebody from doing something that's essential to their well-being. So it kind of got like a little bit of a sinister meaning for me when I looked it up in that context, because it's like, what is the purpose of those dogs directly above where the crustacean would come up? And they're howling at the moon because the crustacean comes up at night. So I thought that was interesting. And so from that point on, once I saw that had that understanding. I added to my understanding of the moon card that it could also be an indicator that somebody's trying to thwart somebody else. Somebody's maliciously, perhaps, doing something to prevent someone else to thrive, or that the act of surviving yourself is at the expense of another individual thriving. So you could take it or leave it. I've never read that interpretation of the moon in any book. It's just a Marilynism, But I thought I'd share it because that's the iconography of the hound above where a crustacean would pop out. Now, the other thing that appears is these two towers. And it could be something as, it could just have been in 1650 that this perhaps was the logo or the symbol for a Eat at Joe's kind of restaurant. Who knows, right? So it could have been, like a tourist destination, like go eat at this wonderful restaurant, between two towers, and, it's a moonlit night and it's a very romantic setting. It could have been something like that, just something that in 1650 in France, in Paris, a location that we might have all recognized and understood to be a favorite eatery or a romantic spot to take on a boat or a place to eat lobster. Who knows? I guess the information is lost to us. But I am fascinated by the French, the Tarot of Marseille moon, because it is a French motif for the moon, and it's been borrowed by countless card makers ever since. Now, the next one I'm going to use, which was probably created around the same period of time as the TDM, and that is the Anonymous Tarot of Paris, where it's kind of a complicated image, but in short, we have a gentleman wooing a woman through her window under the moonlight, and he's playing a harp, and there is some kind of little creature over here, although I'm not sure the detail. And there does seem to be some activity under here, like maybe a cat under a blanket. But it is a different context. It shows the concept of the moon, like this one does, like these cards do. And this one does too, is a moonlit activity. And then this one, though, calls to mind romance. So if this were to be pulled along with the Lover card, or, something, a card that might suggest companionship or whatever, it would be a different aspect of the moon card. Things that happen at night. So not just lunacy, right? Not just lunacy, but things that happen at night. So I think it's another case in point for interpreting the deck, right? Lunacy could be an aspect of this, especially if, a relationship gets out of hand and there are cards to suggest an unstable relationship. Then the wooing under the moon with those cards that suggest an unstable relationship could suggest mental illness or something that's not right. But in and of itself, it's a charming card. And I thought the Swiss 1JJ Swiss Tarot deck is a modern, more modern, like from 1870, something like that. Hold on. Well, something you can't tell from the video is that I just spent about a half an hour trying to find the date for the 1JJ Swiss Tarot. One of my biggest pet peeves with tarot publishers is that they don't at least give us the date of the original material. Now, I couldn't find it anywhere in this box, and I have another one from the same period of time. There was no date on that. I pulled out the cheesy little book that I got in the 70s to go along with this deck, and There's no, although it features this deck prominently, as far as I could see, there's no date for the deck. Now, I also pulled out the 4 volumes of the encyclopedias by Stuart Kaplan, and I didn't read each and every page, but I perused through it to see if I could quickly find the image of one, the one J.J. Swiss deck, and I couldn't find it in any of them. It's in there, but I couldn't find it easily. So I can't give you an exact date for the one J.J. Swiss. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and say somewhere like 1870, something like that. I could be wrong. Don't quote me, but that's what I'm guessing. But at any rate, so if it's around at least the mid-1800s, it's 200 years older, right, than the image where the wooing concept for the moon appeared in France. So, but it still has the crustacean here. We still have the, we still have a nod to the other French motif for the moon. But we have the lovers. A woman being wooed by a gentleman outside. He has a dog. I'm not really clear what this creature is. I'm not entirely sure of everything that's going on in this image, but I can at least see a dog or a cat. But at any rate, this is a much more refined, image with more than one concept. It's got the concept of the wooing, and then it's got the traditional concept with the crustacean. And we have a dog, but the dog here is accompanying the wooer. So it's a little different having a dog here. And then the last card that I thought I would share for the moon is fun because it's near Halloween. It's a couple days away. And I didn't do a Halloween themed video this year. I have a video called 13 Decks for Halloween, and I'll put that link down below. I did it a number of years ago with Halloweenish kind of decks. So I put that down there, but I thought I'd show this card. This one is Halloween Tarot. The only version I have of this is in a tin. US Game Systems Inc. 2008. And it's a fun card. We have the werewolf who comes out on a full moon. So the concept of the full moon and the lunacy that occurs, or the potential for lunacy that occurs on a full moon. We have a French bulldog. There's the crustacean up in the tree. And then there's the castle here. It's not too, and the castle has 2 towers, so we see that. We see a nod to somebody's heads, being on display on the on the post. And then we have some kind of little demon here. Some kind of black cat demon or something like that. And of course the pumpkin. So this one's got like a few things. It's got the, the lunacy aspect. It's got the crustacean, coming out. It's got the towers. It's got the bulldog, So I thought that was a fun card. I may have to do some demonstration readings with this deck because it's a cute deck. I should buy a copy for each of my grandchildren. I don't think I have yet. But this is certainly a good deck for them to have because it's fun. It's cute. So at any rate, I hope I hit on all the topics that I had hoped I would for the moon. And I think it's an interesting card. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.